Picture this: your home. It's comfortable, warm, and safe. It's an ancestral home passed on to you by your grandparents. As the world evolves, your home is now surrounded by building construction. There are chances that you have to give up your ancestral house because of development and urbanization. Now hold on to that feeling. This is what Indigenous peoples face when they protect their own land. It's a difficult battle when their rights are barely recognized. Customary forest tenure is important for Indigenous peoples. Their life is intertwined in their territories. Customary forest tenure is a set of rules that govern and regulate community allocation, use, access, and transfer of natural resources. It gives Indigenous peoples the right to decide on which activities, interventions, and developments to allow. Sadly, only 10% of forest lands worldwide are lawfully recognized as owned by Indigenous peoples. In reality, it's only 1/5 of what it should be. Only 8% of forest lands are allocated for the use of Indigenous peoples. According to the Rights and Resources Initiative, only 8.7% of Asia's territories held by Indigenous peoples and local communities are legally recognized, and the rest are administered and owned by the government, individuals, and firms. Free, prior, and informed consent and customary forest tenure should be properly recognized. Large-scale public and private development projects continue to increase. Conserved areas for Indigenous peoples are not given priority, and recognition of land and forest resources remains weak when it comes to customary forest tenure. Given these concerns, its recognition is crucial, especially in the ASEAN region. With appropriate customary forest tenure recognition and support efforts such as access to grievance and safeguards, sustainable forest management can be ensured. This recognition would give the Indigenous peoples the freedom to access forest territories without the risk of criminalization. However, customary forest tenure is not enough. FPIC, or free, prior, and informed consent, also plays an important role in its recognition. It's a guide for tribes and stakeholders to help maintain and respect Indigenous peoples' self-determination and sovereignty. Free, meaning no manipulation or coercion involved before, during, and after the talk. Before the decision, prior agreement is a must, where it gives ample time for traditional decision-making processes. Indigenous peoples and their community should be well informed about the details of the proposed project. They're the ones who should decide whether to give consent or not to the project. If you were forced to move out of your ancestral home, FPIC makes sure that you will not be manipulated during the talk. You'll be given enough time to make the decision after being informed of the proposed plan for your place. And most important of all, you'll have the deciding factor whether to move out or not. Only the Philippines, Colombia, and Peru, out of 39 countries, have incorporated FPIC legislations in national laws based on 2016 landmark assessment by the World Resources Institute. FPIC helps communities effectively manage the natural resources around them and even assists with solving forest land conflicts. If customary forest tenure and FPIC will continue to be ignored in a community, their livelihood and food security will be at stake. Many customary lands provide food and a source of income, but without proper management, people who benefit from these lands will not be able to have their needs met. Some policies may be present but are limited. To add proper recognition of customary forest tenure and FPIC will mean maintaining equity and plentiful land for many more communities. It will also serve as protection against monopolization. In the ASEAN region, proper implementation of customary forest tenure and FPIC become difficult when there's an unclear policy infrastructure in a region and overlapping mandates between state institutions. To secure customary forest tenure, the government should start raising awareness about it within and outside the Indigenous community. To maximize the benefit of customary forest tenure and FPIC, one must also consider developing an inclusive framework for sustainable investment in Indigenous peoples managed areas. That includes the rights to FPIC and respecting their right to benefit financially, more representation of women and youth in Indigenous communities, and considering the customary forest rights based on the needs of the community. Laws and rules exist to protect us. You get to live peacefully in your ancestral home because of these laws. Indigenous peoples deserve to have equal rights for their own land. Challenges may come along the way, but as long as customary practices and customary forest tenure of Indigenous peoples are being recognized and respected, they'll be able to effectively manage their territories without fear and uncertainty. Recognizing customary forest tenure and FPIC is not a benefit, but rather is a right of Indigenous peoples and local communities. Customary forest tenure recognition and FPIC implementation can make a difference.